guys here, Team Red Bull Driftbrothers, and today we are not in our workshop, we are in Ireland at Track Day Performance, Robbie's workshop. We came here right after our awesome, amazing, mind-blowing event at Goodwood. Packed up and drove straight to Pembroke to the ferry. Took the earliest ferry we could get, drive over here with Kevin, and now we already unloaded our cars. They're in the workshop. What we're going to do here is to fit the turbo, the single turbo, to our cars. You probably already heard that SPR made us an awesome custom header with the Fresh Air ALS that looks just gorgeous. Robbie was busy while we hadn't been here, and the header is already on his dyno engine, on his dyno rigged engine. We will have a look quite shortly at it. And basically Kevin and myself started this morning to disassemble one of the cars. Turbos are already off and the second car is being worked on, but I would say let's first look at the dyno engine. It's a trumpet. There we are in the room, as Robbie calls it, of torture. In a Dynapack dyno cell. At the moment the covers are off from the hub dynos, so there are 4 of them. So basically you can also have an all-wheel driven car and have each hub has its own speed. So this is quite interesting, and the good thing about hub dynos is that you don't have any slip between the tire and the rolling cylinder. How you call it? A roll. So on a hub dyno you don't have any slip. The speed the hub turns is actually the speed the dyno turns, and that's why you can be really precise. But now let's look at the dyno rig. What you can see, 2 of the dynos are connected. So Robbie uses a very sturdy differential and a live axle that is connected to the hubs, and they build the load for the engine. Then we have the prop shaft, a Hardy disc here, a manual gearbox, and the lovely S58 engine. And some wiring that looks quite crazy here, that connects to the Motec M142. It's the same ECU that we use in our cars. And as this one is a development engine, the harness is actually free, because you can change things around way quicker, and it will always be somewhere inside, so there will be no water, no rain or anything coming to the wires. So that's easier to also follow traces where the wires goes or change them. And also the radiator setup is close to what we have in our cars. We have one radiator pack in the front and another radiator pack in the rear, and then there's the exhaust system on the other side. The lengths and the turns are also somewhat similar to what we have in our cars. That means Robbie basically can run this engine and already map it that it almost works perfectly in our cars. Only small tweaks has to be done in the cars then. This is amazing, and look at this setup here. Look at it. Doesn't it look so nice? We start at the front. We have the intake to the compressor side of the turbo. This is here, the compressor. That means air is being sucked in here, gets compressed there, and exits in a compressed way down here. That goes over to the other side of the engine. Right here it comes over, goes up here. Here's the throttle body. That modulates how much air is going through the charge cooler that is here. It's water cooled. Then it goes into the intake plenum, and it separates to cylinder 1 until 6 into the combustion chamber, mixed with fuel, spark, ignition, fire, pressure, piston going down, and then the exhaust gas exits in one of the 6 runners, goes through here, and the exhaust pulse that comes in here pushes basically the turbine of the turbo. That means it's not only the flow, but it's also the momentum of the flow that goes in here. So this is like all the 6 runners are in a very steep angle to really get the maximum efficiency out of the turbine. And this turbine actually spins on the same axis than the compressor. So that means once the exhaust gases are flowing, the compressor has the power to suck in the air and compress the air so that you get more air into the engine. More air in the engine, you can mix more fuel with it, you can make more power. Big fun. So that's the way of the exhaust gases, or almost. So exhaust gases exit here through the exhaust to the back, or once the turbo pressure reaches the target, there's a wastegate, and this time it's a big one. It's a really big one, 60 mil wastegate here. Then the wastegate opens. That means not all the exhaust flow is going through the turbine, but it opens slightly and some excess gas just goes through a so-called screamer pipe out to the, in this case, to the floor. In our case, probably out through the bonnet. And then, what are these two babies? These are the anti-lag valves. They are connected to the pressure side of the compressor. We see a small bend or a intersection down here. This one from the boost pipe coming off here, going on top here, splitting to the two valves. That means once the compressor compresses the air, here is like fresh air compressed. However, as long as the valves are closed, it stays only here. Once the valves open, the fresh air can flow just really close to the exit of the engine and brings fresh air into the header. So it flows in here and the fresh air goes in there. Yeah, so for each runner, we have one pipe going through each runner. Down there, another 3 here. That's why we have 2 valves. So this valve feeds cylinder 1 to 3. This valve feeds cylinder 4 to 6. And what we then can do is basically shut off the ignition coils so there's no spark, and the fuel that we inject basically then goes to the exhaust side, mixes with the fresh air that comes from here. If we hit the right mixture and the right temperature in the exhaust manifold, it will burn there, and the burning gives more energy to the exhaust gas, spins up the turbine of the turbo, spins up the compressor of the turbo, builds up boost. That means you can have boost already at very low RPM, probably even at idle RPM you can already build up some boost, and I'm so looking forward to that system, how it sounds, how it drives, how it performs. I'm so looking forward. Before that, we also had an anti-lag system. You probably know the distinguished sound of our cars. If not, you can have a taste here. What we've done there was that we didn't have these ALS valves, so we had to pump the air through the engine, and that means we basically also shut it down the ignition, so it wasn't igniting in the combustion chamber, it was mixing with fuel, piston goes down, exhaust valves open, piston comes up, pushes air and fuel into the exhaust, and it burned there. However, the amount of air is basically directly related to the RPM the engine spins, and we needed a certain RPM to pump enough air and fuel into the exhaust, and this RPM sometimes was a little bit too high. So for very sharp hairpin turns, sometimes in drifting you really want to have the revs really low, like below 2000 RPM sometimes. And the ALS system sometimes needs up to 3000, 3500 RPM to really keep enough energy in the exhaust to keep the turbo spinning. So that means with a fresh air ALS system, we have the advantage that we are way independent from the RPM, and we, as I said, we probably can already build some boost while the engine is idling. Because fuel-wise, it is, in quotes, quite easy to just put in more fuel. However, air-wise, we are really relied on the piston stroke and the diameter of the piston, and this is basically what we get air-wise if we pump it through the engine. But with this system, we are completely independent of the RPM. As soon as the turbo spins, we have pressure here, and it only depends on how far we open these valves. Maybe to also answer the question that hasn't been risen yet, these valves, the wastegate and the ALS valves, they are activated by pressure. pressure difference. So we have a boost control valve here that actually has high pressure or low pressure, and it can just put either more pressure on the top or on the lower part, and therefore the valve inside will open more or less, so they are activated by air pressure.